are you doing? What's happening?
Al is a lonely loser farmer. Suddenly, all his stats are maxed out, and after he grows the biggest carrot in the city, every girl wants his carrot. One day, after saving the princess from a demon king's attack, she starts tasting his carrot every day. One morning, on his way to the capital to sell his vegetables, Al noticed a group of adventurers struggling against a dragon. Wanting to give them a chance to run away, he stepped in to distract the monster. He tossed a carrot at it, and to everyone's shock, it exploded on impact. That's when Al realized he might be one of the reincarnated god. Without saying a word, he climbed back onto his wagon and continued down the road, leaving the adventurers confused about their mysterious savior. When Al made it to the capital, he ended up stopping a man in a cloak who was trying to run off with a hot woman on his horse. Because guys, he wanted to give her a ride of his personal horse.
What do you mean by that?
Annoyed, the man tried to slash Al with a small blade, but Al's sharp reactions let him slip past every swing and knock the weapon out of his hand. As the guards took the criminal away, the girl approached Al to show her gratitude, but he told her it was no trouble and runs off. Just like you guys who runs off in front of your crush.
Emotional, damn it!
Later, as Al was heading out of the city, the same hot girl found him again. She introduced herself as Fall, the first princess of the Magus Kingdom, and offered him work at the royal palace. Al turned her down, so she tried persuading him by offering him a piece of land close to the capital. Curious, Al asked why she was trying so hard to recruit him. I think guys, that's why he is single. Then Fall explained that the man he defeated had a power level of around 500. Since Al didn't understand, she briefly described how the strength of regular people compares to that of fighters, like adventurers, knights, and heroes. Right, when she asked to check Al's own numbers, the adventurers he had helped earlier showed up, grabbing everyone's attention. They reported that someone else had finished their mission and told the guards what happened with the dragon. Fall quickly figured out Al was the one who saved them. But by the time she turned back to speak to him, he was already rolling away on his wagon. An agent showed up in Huri and told Fall she was called to the palace. When she arrived, the knight said a horde of creatures was closing in on the city. This shocked everyone, since demons and humans had a peace treaty. While the king tried to figure out what was happening, Cecil, top general of the army, said he had linked the day's strange incidents to Romeo, a former commander who still held a grudge against humans. Cecil urged the king and Fall to leave before the horde reached them. After a lot of pleading for the old ruler to take his sheltered daughter and escape, he finally agreed to run. Al had just gotten home. He was about to chill when Testa, his childhood friend, banged on his door to warn him about the creatures. Al rushed to his land to check on his fields and relaxed when he saw nothing had been wrecked. Then he spotted the horde in the distance, so he ducked behind a tree and watched them march toward the royal city, ignoring everything nearby. At first, Al planned to stay out of it, but once he realized that the fall of the capital would mess up his farm business, he figured he had no choice but to step up and Superman again. In the forest, the king and Fall were being guided by Cecil and knights. When they reached a dead end, Fall suggested turning back, but Cecil said it was fine and insisted this was where they needed to be. In the next instant, he turned on the king and attacked him. The knights tried to fight back, but Cecil cut them down easily. Then he went into a villain speech and transformed, revealing he was the demon Romeo in disguise. Romeo explained that, unlike the demon king, who had wanted to wipe out the realm, he planned to take over by pretending to be the human king. He launched a spell at Fall and the king, but the king blocked it with several magic circles. Because he was hurt, he couldn't hold the barrier for long, so Fall copied the spell and reinforced it. Even with their powers combined, they struggled to push back Romeo's attack, and the demon's strength started to overpower their defense. Right when Romeo was about to reincarnate into another world, Al suddenly showed up with his hoe and shattered the magic. Romeo, stunned, rushed at Al, but Al stopped his sword with one hand, then grabbed him and hurled him into a cliffside. Furious, Romeo went full final form, drawing energy from the nearby creatures and changing into his real demon body. Before he could strike, though, Al proved he was the Superman and shut him down, like a PC. When the creatures saw Romeo fall, they panicked and scattered. The next day, the king's family thanked Al and granted him 33,000 units of fields, on the condition that he also signed up with the adventurer group. The day after that, he headed there with Fall, who was hiding her status by dressing like a normal town girl. Before they went inside, Fall told him to keep her background hidden and to call her Philia while they were there. Keeping that in mind, Al walked into the hall. The leader of the association greeted him and took him to the counter to start his registration. Just as Al was introducing himself to Helen, the clerk, his stomach growled loudly. Helen handed him some pie, and once he finished eating, she started asking him questions, and the first question is, "What's your sword size?"
Stop it. Get some help.
While he was answering, the group he had rescued from that huge flying beast came in. They noticed Al and said he was the one who defeated it. The other members nearby started whispering about him, but Al tried to play it down. They praised how strong he was, told him their names, and said he could rely on them as his seniors if he ever needed help. After they leaves, Helen told Al that since he'd just become an adventurer, he'd start at G rank. She gave him a quest sheet list of the things for his first job, plus brief notes on the monsters in that area and how to avoid or clap them. Before sending him out, Helen handed him a robe enchanted to raise the wearer's power. Al thanked her, then left the guild with Fal. When he said he was heading straight to his quest, Fal split off and went her own way. Later that day, while he was collecting the items on his list, Al spotted a strange scale, unlike anything he'd seen. As he tried to figure out what creature it came from, a female orc in heat suddenly jumped him. And only guys God and me know what happened there. Right before things got truly cursed, Jake rushed in, killed the orc, and pulled Al to safety. Luke and Lamea arrived soon after, and once they heard what almost happened, they joked that Al had a talent for pulling monsters instead of hot girls. When the teasing stopped, Al showed them the scale he'd found. They tossed around guesses about which monster it belonged to but couldn't decide, so they agreed to head back toward town. Just as they were about to move, though, a heavy, terrifying aura rolled over them. The pressure was so intense that all of them froze while the creature behind it slowly passed by. Al forced himself to move his head enough to check its stats, and the numbers he saw made him shiver. The next morning, Helen was talking with an elderly woman at the guild when Al walked in and said he had an urgent report. She took him to the guild master's office, where Al and the others described their encounter in the forest. From his appraisal, the monster's attack power was about 230,000, enough to erase the city if it attacked. When Luke said the creature's name, the malevolent dragon Oraoros, both the guild master and Helen were stunned. Jake suggested closing the forest for now and set the scale on the desk as proof. The moment Helen looked at it, memories flooded back, running through a forest with her younger brother, then watching him get eaten by a Ouroboros. As the scene hit that point, she collapsed. Later, while Al spoke with the elderly woman named One, he learned that Helen couldn't remember her childhood. The woman and her husband had found Helen unconscious by a riverbank and taken her in. She guessed Helen had met a Ouroboros back then, and hearing about it now had cracked those memories open. After hearing this, Al decided to dig into her past. He said he would check the library for records from around the time Helen was found. Moved by his resolve, the woman stepped away and came back with a few recovery potions, asking him to take them as payment since she also wanted to know the truth about Helen's past. As Al was heading out of the guild, a postman named Reek stopped him and handed over a note from his mom, making Al wonder how this guy had tracked him down. Later, in the archives, Al asked the librarian if he could see the incident logs from the time Helen was found. She said only specific people could view those documents, and he was about to start begging when Fal walked in, requested access for him, and the librarian agreed. Al searched the shelves until he pulled out the right file. It said a settlement near where Helen had been discovered had been completely erased. Witnesses said the place was broken debris, and the only sign of the attacker was scattered Ouroboros shells. Fal explained that Ouroboros was a creature that stayed alive by feeding on misery and ruined land. It was believed to have vanished after fighting its natural enemy, the holy dragon Mirage. But since it had appeared again, she and Al understood the old records weren't telling the full truth. With that clue, Al chose to travel to the ruined settlement, and Fal went with him. The next day, they reached the ruins. While they were checking the area for any hint of what had happened, Al heard someone calling him. He followed the sound and came across a kid standing there. As Al spoke with the kid, Fal stared, puzzled, and asked who he was talking to. That was when Al put it together and realized the kid was a ghost. The kid introduced himself as Rai and said he was stuck, waiting for someone who could hear him. He asked where Al had gotten his cloak, and Al answered that Helen had given it to him. Rai relaxed and revealed that the cloak had been his when he was alive. After hearing that, Al laid part of the cloak over Fal's back. At first, the princess thought he was trying to hit on her, but when Al pointed Rai out, she panicked, because the cloak had once belonged to Rai. Anyone wearing it could see and talk with his spirit. Al asked Rai who he even was, and Rai dropped the answer by saying he is Helen's little brother. Al was shocked since Helen couldn't remember anything from her early years. That's when Rai warned them Helen's in real danger. To explain, he took them back to something that happened 15 years ago. It started off as a chill day. Rai was just playing around when Helen showed up to call him for lunch. She surprised him, he tripped, and she instantly went into overprotective big sister mode. While he was trying to brush her off, this dark, creepy energy rolled in, and boom, Ouroboros showed up and went berserk on the village. The two rushed back home, praying to find their parents. But instead, they ran into Ouroboros, and only a few villagers had made it out. One brave kid stepped up to defend his family, but Ouroboros didn't care. He said he hated Hope, called it poison, and wanted to wipe it out completely. Rai told Helen they had to escape. She didn't want to believe their parents were gone, but Rai told her to snap out of it. They ran, but Helen couldn't keep up and collapsed. Ouroboros came at her, ready to eat her alive, but Rai threw his dagger straight into the beast's eye to stop him. For a second, he felt proud he'd actually hurt the thing, but Ouroboros healed instantly and turned his rage on Rai. Helen begged him to run, but Rai stood firm and got badly hurt. Helen ran to him, crying, holding him as he bled. Ouroboros just stood there, enjoying her heartbreak like it was a show. He told her he'd let her live, but only so he could come back in 15 years to end her and her future friends for good. As Rai was dying, he swore Ouroboros would never touch Helen again, but the monster had other plans. He said he'd leave Rai's soul behind just to make him watch Helen suffer later. Then, just like that, Ouroboros disappeared, leaving Helen broken and alone with her brother in her arms. In the present, Rai explained that Ouroboros was nothing more than a murderous, twisted beast. The dragon spent years destroying towns and leaving one survivor behind just to spread fear. Rai said that after he died, part of Ouroboros' mind drifted into him, letting him learn how the dragon grows stronger by feeding on people's negative emotions. Now that Ouroboros had awakened again, he was coming for Helen and anyone close to her. Rai begged Al to protect her, but Al said even a hero couldn't beat Ouroboros. Rai then told him that if they cut off the fear and misery the dragon lived on, they could weaken him enough to fight back. Al agreed, and before leaving with Fal, Rai asked him to give Helen a message. When they returned to the capital, Fal went to handle the evacuation while Al searched for Helen. But Helen had already left, heading into the forest. Her memories had finally returned, and she believed she could face Ouroboros by herself. The dragon mocked her for it, calling her foolish and blaming her for Rai's death. He told her the entire capital would also die because of her. Desperate, Helen begged him to spare them. The more she pleaded, the more hopeless she felt, and Ouroboros fed on it. Trying to save everyone, Helen offered her own life, but Ouroboros told her it didn't matter because they'd all die anyway. Broken, she raised her dagger to end her life, and the dragon pushed her to finish it. Right before she could, Al enters like Superman and stopped her. Ouroboros grew furious and smacked Al aside, but Al's cloak softened the hit. He quickly got up and punched the dragon in the face, knocking him back for a moment. Ouroboros admitted he didn't expect that, but reminded Al he was still far weaker than him. Al promised Helen he'd keep her safe, which triggered a memory. Rai had once told her the same thing. Al then stepped up to face Ouroboros. The dragon growled and launched an attack, but Al kept dodging everything with perfect timing. Even when Ouroboros shot flames, Al didn't back down. He stood his ground. Helen, watching in fear, begged Al to run. She started talking like one of those side characters made just to push the story forward. Al wasn't having it. He grabbed her and ran off, telling her to stop thinking like that because he had no intention of letting her die. He also reminded her that the past, what happened 15 years ago, wasn't her fault, but she still blamed herself. Annoyed, Al told her to zip it for a second so he could share the message Rai had given him. As she heard her brother's words, Helen saw a vision of him smiling, just like old times. It hit her. She finally accepted the truth. Al was trying to make her see that hope was the only way to beat Ouroboros. Suddenly, light tore through the dark clouds, and Ouroboros freaked out, yelling at Al for ruining everything. Al fired back, saying the dragon's powers were weakening because Helen wasn't scared anymore. Right after that, the light struck Ouroboros, and he screamed in pain. Angry, the dragon dove at Al, but the farm boy surprised him with a clean uppercut, knocking him out cold. Helen rushed to check on Al, but out of nowhere, she stabbed him. That's why, guys, you should never trust girls. Shocked, Al reached for a healing potion, but his hands shook and he spilled it. Helen laughed at him and started going full slasher mode, slicing at him like a possessed maniac. Al dodged all of it. When she finally stopped, Al asked what was wrong with her, not realizing something had changed in her eyes. As he tried to heal with magic, Helen charged again. Before she could land a hit, Mirage jumped in and blocked her. Mirage told Al to stay focused and revealed the truth. Helen wasn't in control. Ouroboros was the one pulling the strings. The dragon wasn't thrilled about being exposed and started ranting, but Mirage cut him off. Then, turning back to Al, Mirage offered him a gift, his own power of regeneration, and told him to use it to fight back. After taking Mirage's power, Al's wound sealed up fast, but Mirage grew weak and collapsed. Before blacking out, he told Al that the only way to save Helen was to cleanse Ouroboros completely. Right away, the dragon started taunting Al, asking if he'd seriously hurt Helen just to stop him. In reply, Al punched her right in the stomach, completely catching Ouroboros off guard. He didn't expect Al to hit Helen without hesitation. When he questioned it, Al just said her eyes were silently asking for his hoe. Sorry guys, her eyes needs help. Thinking Helen was finally free, Al offered his hand. But as soon as she grabbed it, Ouroboros tried jumping into Al's body. To his shock, his mind was full of new video anime recap time. So after video you should watch all the videos. And guys, in reality, in his mind, there was nothing useful in Al's head, just farming. No rage, no fear, nothing for the dragon to use. With nothing to cling to, the takeover failed. While Ouroboros tried to figure out what went wrong, Mirage regained just enough strength to deal the final blow. Before fading out for good, he thanked the now unconscious Al for putting an end to the nightmare. Later, Al woke up at the guild's clinic with Fal and Helen at his side, playing the nurse role. Fal checked on him, then hugged him tight, giving him the best comfort on this planet, but quickly pulled back once she realized she was being way too clingy. Al asked what happened to Ouroboros, and Helen told him Mirage had purified him right before disappearing. Fal was shocked. She thought Mirage was just a legend. Al explained what triggered his appearance, and then asked Helen if there were any after effects from being possessed. Helen admitted that while the dragon was gone, she still had his powers. When her arms shifted in front of them, both Al and Fal panicked. But Helen wasn't scared. She said she planned to use her new power to protect people. Then she turned to Al, thanking him for passing along Rai's message. With a warm smile, she said she'd live happily moving forward to honor the brother who gave everything for her. Al smiled back, but the moment was cut short when Fal interrupted, asking why they were making those eyes at each other. Both denied it right away, which made Fal secretly happy. She clearly wasn't into sharing Al. Then, Helen turned to Fal and asked who she really was and what her deal with Al was, since her hairpin had done a great job hiding her identity. The question caught them off guard, but Fal smoothly recovered and said she is the childhood crush of Al. Right then, every guild master, Jake, Luke, Lamia, and one, burst into the room. They were totally freaked out about Al and Helen, so seeing both of them okay was a huge relief. Everyone started talking at once, until one yelled at the group to quiet down. Al still needed to rest. Al told them he was fine and even stood up to prove it. Seeing that, Jake grinned and said it was time to celebrate their win over Ouroboros and declared the guild master would cover the costs. But he says richer than Elon Musk. The old man immediately protested, saying he wasn't made of money, but the others told him to quit being stingy, reminding him the palace would be paying them big time for taking down the dragon. At that, Fal casually mentioned that they'd definitely get the reward, which made the whole room pause and look confused. Realizing she slipped up, Fal quickly backtracked and changed the subject. Thankfully, nobody questioned it, and everyone moved to the lounge to start the party. During the celebration, Fal pulled Al aside and admitted she'd been super worried the whole time he was up against Ouroboros. But watching him stand his ground even when the odds were against him had inspired her to keep fighting for her people. Not far away, Helen was showing off her new dragon powers, turning them into party tricks, to everyone's amusement. A few days later, Al was back on his farm. He and Testa were walking back to the house after harvesting, when Reeks ran up with a letter from Al's dad. The letter was simple. His father asked how he was doing and invited him to visit for a while. After hearing what it said, Testa asked when the last time Al saw his parents was. Al admitted he honestly couldn't remember. Testa gave him a look and said that officially worst son ever in anime history. Al told Testa he'd definitely visit his folks, but only after finishing all the baddies around me. Sorry guys, he mean the quests he had lined up. Later that day, while heading to the guild, he stopped by a tomato stand and bought some. The moment he tasted one, he had a full-on food meltdown. Curious, he asked the vendor where they came from. The man said they were from Lurugus, and just like that, Al sprinted off. He arrived at the guild and asked Helen if she could reassign his quest to someone else, since he planned to visit his parents in Lurugus and maybe grab some fertilizer while he was at it. Helen surprised him by saying she'd take over. She explained that she'd been doing quests a few times a week and had now reached F rank. She enjoyed using her new powers to wipe out monsters. Al was impressed, and Helen told him he could relax while he was away. As Al left the guild, he bumped into Fowl. The moment she heard he was heading to his parents, she insisted on tagging along. But before she could finish, Al was already gone, vanished faster than she could blink. While traveling through the forest on his way to Lurugus, Al ran into an orc. At first, he thought it just wanted to talk, until he realized it was after something else entirely. Al tried to run, but couldn't escape. Just when things were looking real bad, a blue-haired girl named Ruri showed up and sliced the orc down like it was nothing. Shaken, Al thanked Ruri for saving him from what would have been a nightmare. Ruri, curious, asked why he was wandering around the woods without backup. Al told her he was still new to adventuring though. For whatever reason, he seemed to attract pervy orcs. Ruri teased him, saying he must just be their type. She then introduced herself, and after a bit of chat, asked where he was heading. When Al said, Lurugus, she lit up. She was headed there too and offered to escort him. Al looked awkward. He pointed out that since they were strangers and not even the same gender, it felt a bit weird. Ruri gave him a scary grin and warned that if he tried anything funny, she'd cut his head off. Al flinched. Seeing his reaction, Ruri laughed and said she was only joking. Plus, she wasn't cute enough for guys to flirt with her. Al blinked and asked if her eyes were broken because she looked really pretty to him. I think guys, my boy maxed out all his Riz game, where you can't get a single girlfriend. Ruri turned red at Al's compliment and thanked him, saying he was just being polite. Al tried to deny it, but she gave him a sharp stare that shut him up instantly. As they walked toward Lurugus, a sudden noise made them stop and take guard. To their surprise, it was just Reeks, showing up to hand over a letter from Al's mom. Al couldn't believe it's John Cena. Sorry guys, I mean it's Reeks had tracked him this far, but the guy said it was all part of the job. After Reeks left, Ruri asked if it was serious. Al shrugged and said no, showing her a bunch of unopened letters from his mom. He joked that one reason for going home was to get her to stop acting like a crazy fan. His main goal was to grab fertilizer, but he ended up rambling about tomatoes and how to grow them. Ruri struggled to follow until Al realized he was overwhelming her and quickly apologized. He then asked if her family was as clingy. Ruri calmly said no, they didn't really check in on her. Al was surprised and asked why, but she brushed it off and started setting up camp, pulling gear out of her bag. Al was amazed by how much she had packed, and Ruri explained it was a Doraemon pocket, basically a pocket world. Right then, Al's stomach roared, so she cooked him a meal. After eating, he overanalyzed the food like some food critic. Curious, he asked why she was headed to Lurugus. Ruri explained she was training and took a side mission after hearing demons were attacking the town. Al asked for more details, but she said there weren't any. He pointed out how risky that sounded. Ruri shrugged and said it was her duty. She was descended from a hero. Al was shocked but still thought it was too much to handle alone. His concern surprised her, but she thanked him and said she'd be fine. Then she stood and said it was time to rest. As Al tried to lie by the fire, she stopped him. Ruri told Al to come and have some fun in tent, but he awkwardly declined, like a Sigma male. Then she casually warned that if he stayed outside, some orcs might come for his innocence. Terrified, Al scrambled into the tent without hesitation. And guys, on that night only me and the god only knows what happened that night, but I gave you a hint. In that game, only 69 rounds were played. The next morning, after reaching Lurugus, Ruri hinted that she'd like to meet again. Al asked if she'd be willing to be his escort for the return trip. She was thrilled and even sketched out a little map showing where she'd be staying, just in case he needed to find her. After parting ways, Ruri started digging for info on the demon attacks she'd heard about, but no one in town had seen anything suspicious. She found that strange but wasn't ready to give up. If she quit now, everyone who said she wasn't cut out for this would be right. Just then, a woman screamed nearby. Ruri ran over and learned that a group of demons had kidnapped her sister. She asked which way they went, and the woman pointed toward the Forest of Illusion. Ruri took off without a second thought, vowing to rescue the girl. Unbeknownst to her, someone was watching from the shadows. Meanwhile, Al had made it to his parents' place. Before he could knock, his mom named Lucia burst through the door, tackled him into a hug, and sprinted around town with him in her arms before crashing into their own wall. Completely out of breath, Al was crushed in her arms while she sobbed about how much she missed him. Just then, his dad stepped outside, assumed Al was a random guy flirting with his wife, and socked him. That earned him a beating from his wife, who dragged him inside and lectured him for attacking their son. At dinner, Lucia gave Al a full spread of his favorite food while Gilles was served a burned meal as punishment. While eating, Al slipped up and mentioned Rory, which got his mom instantly suspicious. Gilles joked that a hot girlfriend wouldn't be so bad, and Lucia hit him with a wrestling move. Al, panicking, quickly clarified that Rory was just helping him out and that he was still totally single, just like some of you, who are born single and die single. The next day, after buying his fertilizer, Al got tricked into entering the Forest of Illusion by the same guy who'd been spying on Rory. While wandering through the woods, Al came across the same woman Rory had saved earlier and rescued her again from a monster attack. But then, shockingly, she morphed into the very creature she'd just been running from. Right as the monster lunged at Al, Rory jumped in and took it down without hesitation. She told him the thing kept reviving every time she killed it. Before Al could process what was happening, the shady man finally revealed himself. Rory recognized him. He was the so-called merchant who first mentioned the demon sightings. He sarcastically praised her monster slaying, but called her an idiot for falling for his trap. Then, he introduced himself as Loki, a demon in disguise. Furious, Rory demanded to know why Al had been dragged into this. Loki said Al was actually the key target, the guy who wiped out Romeo and even Oraoros. That made him way too important to ignore. Rory was stunned but still charged at Loki. He easily countered and knocked her aside. Al quickly healed her with magic, and Rory apologized, saying she was more useless than all of you combined. Al told her he didn't see her that way. Then he tried fighting Loki himself, but Loki dodged everything with ease and sent Al crashing into the ground with one powerful punch. Luckily, Al didn't fall, but instead, he smashed his way back up and landed a clean hit on Loki. But the demon responded with a brutal counterattack that could have ended anyone without a solid layer of plot armor. That's when Loki realized Al wasn't just some random farm guy. Acknowledging the threat, Loki told Al he planned to kill him. Al asked why, and Loki explained that his mission was to wipe out anyone who could mess up his bigger plan. He said he targeted Rory too because, just like the Demon King was powered by the evil god, the chosen hero had the good god's blessing. Rory had it, but it hadn't awakened yet. After his speech, Loki summoned his creatures and sent them straight at Rory. Al dove in to protect her. Once she snapped out of it, she joined the fight and told Al to escape. But Al refused and teamed up with her to hold the monsters off, even though they kept coming back like my ex's back to me. Loki hurled some flashy explosion magic that left a crater behind. As Al and Rory struggled to get up, one beast slammed Rory aside and joined another in attacking Al. While they clung to him like leeches, Loki turned to finish Rory off. Rory, thinking it was the end, mentally apologized to her parents for failing. But suddenly, the monsters died, poisoned by the fertilizer strapped to Al's back. It doubled as pesticide, and they couldn't handle it. Loki admitted Al had outsmarted him but mocked his injuries. Al still rushed him, saying he'd protect Rory and take him down. Loki dodged, calling him impatient, but Al stood firm. Hearing Al's words made Rory stop doubting herself. She realized she'd let others define her and believed she wasn't meant to be a hero. With her confidence fully ignited, Rory ran at Loki and drove her blade into him. He barely flinched, calling it a scratch, but Rory warned him next time she wouldn't miss. She started powering up, and before Loki could react, she landed a proper hit that sent him reeling. Once Loki vanished, Rory dashed to Al, who was barely conscious. The fight had drained him, and he passed out in her arms. When he came to, he realized his head was resting on her lap and tried to sit up too fast, accidentally knocking heads with her. He apologized, and they both laughed it off before heading back toward town. As they walked through the woods, a weird sound echoed nearby. Rory guessed it was a monster or ghost, but Al's expression changed. He recognized the voice. It was his mom. In full panic mode, he scooped Rory into his arms and ran like his life depended on it. He only stopped once they were far enough away. He set her down, and she laughed, teasing him about being scared of ghosts. Al didn't reply because to him, his mom was way worse. When they reached the hotel Rory mentioned, it turned out to be fake, another illusion. Loki had cooked up. Later, Al returned home, silently hoping his mom was still out looking for him. Unfortunately, as he stepped inside, Lucia appeared out of nowhere. Startled, Al bolted past Gilly without saying a word. Left alone, Gillies ended up facing Lucia's rage and was punished accordingly, left dangling outside like laundry. The next morning, Al tried to slip out early, but Lucia grabbed onto his leg, sobbing and begging him to stay. Giles told her to let him go, but she snapped at him. Al gently warned that if she didn't stop clinging so hard, he might start to resent her. That made her pause. She apologized for being overbearing. Before letting him go, she asked if farming was something he truly chose, or if he felt trapped by it. A hazy childhood memory of standing at a grave flashed through Al's mind, but he shook it off and told her not to worry. Lucia accepted that and encouraged him to follow his own path. Al thanked her, said goodbye to both parents, and went off to restock fertilizer. He met Rory again, and as they started their journey back, Al told her that if she ever got into trouble, he'd be there. Rory blushed hard at his words. Back at the capital, Fal was on her balcony when her maid approached to say the king was asking for her. A few days after arriving back in the capital, Al took Rory to the Adventurers Guild so she could register. Not long after, he caught a young boy sneaking around his farm, just as Helen and Rory showed up to help. Rather than scolding the boy for stealing, Al snapped because the kid had plucked his eggplants too soon. The girls weren't shocked. Classic Al behavior. The boy apologized, and when his stomach grumbled, Al handed him a freshly harvested cabbage. After one bite, the kid's face lit up, and he claimed it was the tastiest thing he'd ever eaten before running off. Grateful, Helen explained that supply lines had been disrupted by monster raids, causing food costs to skyrocket. That moment, alarm bells echoed. Another attack had begun. Al and the girls dashed into the capital to assist. They joined forces with the knights and other adventurers, clashing with a flood of beasts. But no matter how many fell, more came to replace them. Just when morale was beginning to collapse, a group of knights from a neighboring kingdom suddenly arrived. Their leader unsheathed a sacred blade and commanded the monsters to retreat. Shockingly, they obeyed and vanished into the forest. That evening, while Al cleaned his tools, Fal showed up at his home unexpectedly. She told him she'd come for some fun in the night. Sorry, she came to say goodbye. She was leaving Magus permanently. Before Al could ask why, her maid Albi arrived, announcing it was time to go. Fal stood, bid Al farewell, and made her way to the carriage. Al followed, demanding answers, but she remained quiet as the carriage rolled away, leaving him confused. A few days later, the boy's mother visited with her son to apologize again. She also mentioned that she was a seamstress and would gladly help if Al ever needed custom garments. The kid tried hyping her up, but she humbly redirected the conversation and asked to buy vegetables. After their visit, they left. Just as Al was recovering from the interaction, Reeks silently appeared next to him like Undertaker with a letter from his mother. Startled, Al thanked him. As they spoke, the subject turned to the recent battle. Al remarked how generous the kingdom of Antisburg had been in saving them. Reeks gave a vague grunt and said things weren't so straightforward. Al raised an eyebrow and asked what he meant, but Reeks deflected and handed over a newspaper. Al's soul left his body after reading the headline. Back at the guild, Rory and Helen were chatting when Rory's stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. Helen chuckled and handed her some sandwiches, while Rory scarfed them down like she hadn't eaten in days. Helen casually opened the newspaper and pointed out the headline to her. Apparently, Fal was tying the knot with the Prince of Antisburg. The two girls immediately raised eyebrows, guessing it was a political move rather than a romantic one. Rory even questioned how weird it was that the monsters listened to the prince in the first place, since everyone knows monsters have the IQ of moldy bread and don't speak human. Just then, Al walked in and handed them a letter from his mom. Before they could even get past the first paragraph, he panicked. The intro was nothing but Lucia pouring out cringe-level affection for her sweet baby boy, and Al wanted to dig a hole and vanish. He yanked the letter back and ripped off the embarrassing part, then handed them the section he actually wanted them to read. Turns out, Lucia had been looking into the monster attacks herself. According to her, the whole sacred sword thing was a total scam. The weapon had no real power. She claimed the sword was faker than a knockoff handbag, and said her info was 100% solid. Why? Because back in the day, she used to be the commander of the shadow puppets. Helen and Rory both froze in shock. Meanwhile, Al stood there totally blank-faced, having zero clue what the big deal was. The girls had to spell it out for him. The shadow puppets weren't some puppet theater. They were the top-secret intel squad of the kingdom. The kind of elite unit that made even the legendary Call of Duty ops look like you, which mean useless, and somehow, his clingy mom used to run the whole thing, which means she is the leader. While reading the rest of the letter, the group discovered that the monster attacks were being orchestrated by a demon whose lover was being held hostage by the Prince of Antisburg. This revelation made it clear that the prince had engineered the entire crisis to manipulate Fal into marriage. Determined to reveal the truth, they agreed to expose him. Ruri noted that sneaking into Antisburg would be tough due to their strict immigration checks. Al responded that he had a solution, and right then, Reeks, who'd been waiting quietly, stepped forward. Meanwhile, in Antisburg, Prince Netulus met with envoys from other kingdoms, exploiting their pleas for help to his benefit. After they left, Gazelle, the demon forced to summon the monsters, refused to continue. Netulus struck him, reminding him that his lover's safety depended on his obedience. At that moment, Fal entered the room. Gazelle quickly hid under his hood as she scolded Netulus for hitting someone. The prince defended himself, claiming discipline was necessary. Back in Magus, while Al picked up the clothing he'd ordered from the tailor, Reeks informed the girls that a friend had arranged safe passage for them into Antisburg. When Al returned, Reeks handed them a carriage and told them to pose as delivery workers bringing wedding goods. Curious, the group asked what Reeks would do next. He explained that he'd locate monsters to help expose Netulus and casually revealed that he was actually one of the demons living peacefully among humans. The following day, Al and the girls arrived in Antisburg. As they stepped out, Al was confident, but the girls were skeptical, thinking their disguises would draw too much attention. Al argued that farmers raised no suspicion and reviewed the plan: rescue Gazelle's lover, get her to the church, reunite the couple, and have Gazelle expose the fake sacred sword. As they exited the alley, a knight stopped them to ask who they were. Nervous, the girls panicked, but Al calmly replied they were farmers delivering vegetables. The knight didn't buy it and called for backup. Soon, they were fleeing a squad of guards. The girls blamed Al, but stuck to the mission. Unable to escape, they tossed Al through a castle wall. By luck, Al landed in the room where Gazelle's lover was held. He told her he was there to rescue her, but noticed a chain on her leg. Right then, guards entered, and Al used his farming skills through vegetables to take them down. With no time to waste, he carried the girl and escaped. He soon met up with Helen and Ruri, and together, they ran toward the church. As the knights closed in, the girls stayed behind to stall them while Al continued ahead. At the church, the wedding ceremony had begun. The king walked Fal to the altar, where she met Prince Netulus. Though unsure, Fal still agreed to marry him. When the priest prompted them to break the seal, "Sorry guys, I mean close with a kiss," Netulus leaned in. Fal silently wished he'd back off. Suddenly, the church doors flew off their hinges, hitting Netulus and sending him to the floor. Everyone gasped in shock. Al walked in, and Fal's worried expression melted into relief. Netulus stood up and accused Al of trying to abduct the princess. He ordered the guards to arrest him, but Al calmly stated that the sacred sword was a fake. The room erupted into whispers. Netulus felt exposed, but tried to stay composed, claiming Al was sabotaging the wedding. The king defended the sword's authenticity, saying he'd witnessed its power. Netulus backed that up and smugly asked Al if he had proof. Just as Al began to respond, a knight rushed in, warning that monsters were invading the city. Above the chaos, Reeks soared through the sky, blowing a magical flute that summoned the creatures. Panic spread through the guests, who now demanded that Netulus use the sword to drive the monsters away. Trying to maintain control, Netulus called for Gazelle to bring the sword. But instead of obeying, the demon appeared reunited with his lover. Then Reeks entered, holding the sacred sword. Netulus hesitated to touch it. The guests panicked as monsters entered the church. Al grabbed the blade and threw it at the first creature. The sword shattered instantly on impact. That was all the proof they needed. The king asked how Netulus had used a fake sword to repel monsters. Gazelle stepped forward, admitting it was all staged. He demonstrated by blowing his flute and the monsters retreated on cue. He explained that whenever Netulus raised the sword, it was his signal to activate the flute. When asked to explain himself, Netulus broke into manic laughter and revealed that he had sent a monster swarm to Magus the day before. Gazelle asked how, without his help. Netulus said he had scattered monster corpses around the city to attract them. As he boasted about Magus falling, Ruri and Helen appeared and assured everyone the capital was safe. They explained that once the attack stopped, the citizens asked them to teach them how to defend themselves. The king was proud to hear this. Al then told Fal she didn't need to give up her future for the kingdom's sake. At that moment, the knights of Antisburg arrived, and much to Netulus's surprise laid down their weapons and arrested him. Helen and Ruri explained that while being chased, they had exposed the truth to the knights, who chose to side with them. Still refusing to lose, Netulus lunged at the king with a knife, but Al stopped him using a radish and landed a punch that knocked him out cold. After he was taken away, Fal ran to Al and embraced him, confessing her feelings. Ruri objected to their relationship, while Helen remained quiet. The king gave them his blessing before leaving the church. Before he could exit, Reeks approached and handed him a letter intercepted from Neteris, revealing that the prince wasn't the real mastermind behind it all. A few days later, Fal returned to the guild with a chest of jewels to thank everyone for protecting the city. While the adventurers celebrated, she left, only to return later as her alternate identity. This led to a tense, silent stare between her and Ruri over Al. One morning, while Al was gathering crops, both girls showed up, pressing him about his feelings. Al ignored them until Ruri asked if there was someone else he cared for. Shockingly, he said yes, but refused to name the person and walked off with his harvest. That night, Al placed vegetables before a framed photo and told the girl in it he'd picked a lot that day. Years earlier, when Al was a boy, he helped his father, Gilles, harvest a huge batch of potatoes. Gilles praised him, but Lucia suddenly appeared and scolded her husband for overworking their child. Later, Al brought some potatoes to an elderly couple. While there, he saw two men dragging a girl about his age. The couple told him she was a thief with no family and would be sold to a slaver. As the girl broke free and fled, she snatched Al's potato basket. He later found her eating near the mountain. She ran at first, but Al calmly told her he only wanted to bring her food. She didn't reply, so he left a bowl nearby and walked off. The next day, he brought more food. Getting no response again, he placed it down and left. On the third day, she emerged and allowed him to sit nearby while she ate. Al proudly told her that he grew the tomatoes in the sandwich. Impressed, she listened as he shared how his father believed a farmer's joy came from seeing people smile while eating their produce. When he asked her name, she replied, Ilvia. He introduced himself. Then, his stomach growled, and she offered him her sandwich. Before he could accept, the same men appeared and grabbed her. Al asked why they were still after her, and they claimed she needed to pay for their previous losses. Al dropped to his knees, pleading with them to let her go, promising to repay the debt with farm work. They refused. Just then, Gilles appeared carrying a sack of rice. After hearing what happened, he gave them the rice in exchange for Ilvia's freedom. Once they left, Al asked if he was sure. Gilles said yes, but admitted Lucia might kill him for it. Ilvia returned the stolen potato basket, and Gilles remarked they could use extra hands to cook. It took Al a moment to realize what he meant. Then he asked Ilvia if she'd like to help cook at their house every day. Realizing he was inviting her to live with them, she cheerfully accepted. 2 years passed. Ilvia had become a part of the family and rarely left Al's side. One afternoon, she told him to take a break from farming. Al brushed her off. Their father told her to leave it, but Ilvia protested. Al, annoyed, told her to play with other kids instead of shadowing him. She refused. Suddenly, Testa came charging toward them, chased by a swarm of bees. Lucia appeared out of nowhere and took the bees down with swift strikes. She then told them that she and Gilles were heading into town to look at new houses. Al objected, saying their current house was fine. Lucia explained that as a family of 4, they needed more space. When he continued protesting, Gilles cut him off, telling them to take care of the house and farm in their absence. Once their parents were gone, Al asked Testa why the bees were after him. Testa pulled out a map, showing an X where he had gone treasure hunting in the woods. While exploring, he had disturbed a beehive. He convinced Al to help him find the treasure. When Ilvia asked to come too, they both said no. As they walked through the forest, Al asked why Ilvia always followed him instead of playing with others. Testa explained that the other kids didn't like her and treated her badly when she tried to join in. Al was surprised and saddened. Testa added that this was also why their parents were looking for a new house, so Ilvia could have a fresh start where people were more accepting. Feeling guilty, Al suggested turning back, but Testa begged him to stay out a bit longer. Al eventually gave in and continued the search alongside his friend. Eventually, they reached the spot marked on the map. As they searched the area, the ground gave way beneath them, and they dropped into a hidden cavern. Within it stood a decrepit building, clearly untouched for years. Testa noticed an old tablet etched with unknown symbols. When Al placed his hand on it, the tablet glowed. In an instant, Al found himself face to face with what looked like a dragon. It lunged at him, then everything went black. Al awoke inside a tent with Ilvia beside him, visibly relieved. Moments later, Ta walked in. Still confused, Al asked what had happened. Testa brought him outside and pointed to the devastation. A volcano had erupted, plunging the area into chaos. A villager then shouted that the bridge to the capital had been destroyed, meaning they'd need to wait for rescue. Soon after, Testa left to reunite with his newly found parents, while Ilvia helped support Al back to the tent. On the way, they overheard the village chief mention the food shortage. Determined, Al said he would check on their fields. But when he arrived, the farmland had been completely ruined. Overwhelmed with frustration, Al collapsed in pain. Ilvia panicked, but Al assured her he was fine. That night, while the village slept, Ilvia snuck into the chief's tent, intending to steal food, but changed her mind, recalling how Al had once begged for her freedom. The next morning, she quietly placed her meal beside Al, claiming it had come from relief efforts. Over the next several days, she continued secretly giving him her rations. Eventually, the toll became too much. Ilvia collapsed. Testa found her and rushed to inform Al, but by then, it was too late. Ilvia had died from starvation. Devastated, Al asked how that could be when the capital had sent supplies. Testa explained that no such help had arrived. That's when Al realized she had sacrificed everything for him. Grief-stricken, he cradled her body, weeping. Later, Al stood quietly at her grave, blaming himself for her death. In the present, he thought of how, if Ilvia were still alive, he would have made sure she never went hungry again. But rather than dwell on the past, he chose to focus on the life in front of him. Weeks later, after completing a monster extermination request, Al was on his way home when he discovered an unconscious girl lying on the roadside. Concerned for her well-being, he decided to bring her back to his house. The next morning, she stood before him, asking why she was there. Al explained he had found her collapsed and brought her to safety. She then questioned if he was one of those perverts who preyed on vulnerable women. Al, unfazed, clarified that if he had intentions like that, he wouldn't wait until she was unconscious. He added he wasn't interested in anything inappropriate. He asked where she had been headed before collapsing. She replied she had intended to visit the guild to place a request. When she tried to leave, Al offered to take her there after they had breakfast, mentioning he had errands there too. Before they left, he introduced himself. She responded with her name, Linnea. Shortly after, Rory visited Al's house. Seeing Linnea there, she immediately jumped to conclusions, assuming they had spent the night together. Linnea tried asking who she was, but Rory screamed that Al was indecent and stormed out. Later at the guild, Al explained the misunderstanding to Helen, who promised to talk to Rory. He also mentioned that Linnea was there to make a request, so Helen took them into a private room. Once seated, Helen asked Linnea to share the details of her request. Linnea explained she wanted someone to investigate bizarre events in her hometown. Unfortunately, she had no evidence to support her claims, which made the request hard to accept. Al, being kind-hearted, immediately offered to help. Grateful, Helen asked for her hometown's name. When Linnea said it was Gold Town, Al got excited. He'd always dreamed of visiting the town known for its prized asparagus. Before they departed, Al got Linnea a change of clothes, prompting her to accuse him of being a lecher. He reassured her he had no intentions beyond helping. Still skeptical, she agreed to trust him for now. They rode to Gold Town on a carriage. Midway through the trip, a female orc began chasing them, making Al panic. More orcs joined in, escalating his fear until he passed out. He later woke up with his head in Linnea's lap. Embarrassed, he jumped up and apologized, noticing she had given him a pendant like hers. She explained it had calming and protective effects and insisted he keep it. Upon reaching Gold Town, guards stopped them at the gate. Linnea vouched for Al, and they were let in, but Al found it odd that the guards carried mops instead of weapons. While exploring, he spotted a vendor selling asparagus skewers and rushed to buy one. As he waited, he asked the vendor about the town's oddities, but the man claimed everything was normal. However, the skewer he handed Al was burnt black, and the vendor looked strangely vacant. Linnea pointed out that the vendor wasn't acting right. They soon noticed another man knock over his vegetable cart, but continue walking as if nothing happened. Al called out to him to pick up his goods, but the man, like the vendor, appeared vacant. Before Al could react, two townsfolk mistook him for baggage and carried him off. Linnea later found him near a fountain and invited him to her home to rest. At her family's store, she showed Al more of the protective pendants and explained that wearing them was the reason they hadn't been affected by the town's strange behavior. Al asked to take some, and Linnea agreed. When he inquired about her parents, she explained she hadn't seen or heard from them since the town began acting strangely. Al promised to help uncover the truth. As they explored the town further, Al noticed that things kept getting weirder. The only person who appeared unaffected besides himself and Linnea was the local lord, Lemuru Horn. Upon hearing his name, Al became visibly excited. Lemuru was someone he admired, and meeting him felt like a dream. When Al asked if he could speak with him about the town's situation, Lemuru welcomed him for dinner at his estate. But before they could meet, Al was once again mistakenly carried off by the same people who thought he was luggage earlier. Linnea later found him at the town square's statue. While talking, she asked if Lemuru's behavior hadn't seemed suspicious. Al agreed that something felt off, but said he needed to properly investigate before jumping to conclusions. That evening, Al and Linnea arrived at Lemuru's estate for dinner. As they sat down, his guards abruptly drew their swords on Al, unfazed. Al fought them off and moved to confront Lemuru, who was actually being controlled by a demon. Revealing his scheme, Vita explained that after taking over Lemuru, he embedded magic-infused crystals inside the fountain statue in the town square. This allowed him to control the minds of everyone in town. Learning of Al's prior victories against Romeo and Oraoros, Vita changed his plan, believing that possessing Al would make him unbeatable. As Vita attempted to take control of him, Al crushed a small stone in his hand. Immediately, the statue in the square exploded. Vita, confused, demanded to know how it happened. Al revealed that smashing the stone signaled Helen and Ruri, who had rigged the statue with explosives. Vita doubted it, saying Linnea had kept watch on Al the entire time. Al then reminded him of the 2 brief moments he was out of her sight those times. Helen and Ruri had secretly pulled him away to warn him and later form a plan using the crystals. Infuriated, Vita forced Lemuru to end his own life, but Al stopped him by tossing a piece of asparagus into Lemuru's mouth. The taste jolted him back to reality, allowing Al to strike Vita and break the demon's hold. Afterward, Linnea gave Al the pendant as a keepsake and kissed him on the cheek in gratitude. Helen and Ruri saw the whole thing, and as soon as Al began walking away, they chased after him, demanding an explanation. Days later, while helping on the farm, the girls heard Al cry out and rushed over, only to discover that he was distressed over weeds. Embarrassed, he admitted he hadn't noticed them earlier, leaving the girls unsure how to respond. Later, at the market, while selling produce, the king showed up disguised. Spotting him, Fal quickly hid to avoid blowing her cover. The king bought some vegetables and casually asked Al when he planned to marry his daughter. Al fumbled for a polite refusal, but the king, ever cunning, offered him more land and new tools if he agreed. Tempted, Al considered it, until Ruri stepped in and pulled him back to reality. Frustrated, Fal threw a potato at Ruri, missed, and hit Al instead. He passed out, and during unconsciousness, a mysterious woman appeared to him. But he woke up before learning anything meaningful and kept the experience to himself. Once the king departed, the rest of their goods sold out. Al thanked the girls and said he'd use the earnings to buy herbicide. His sudden obsession with wiping out the weeds unsettled the girls, who quickly made up excuses to leave before he fully embraced his villain era. While wandering through town, Al bumped into Reeks, who sarcastically asked if someone had ruined his morning by spoiling his cereal. Al, visibly agitated, vented about the invasive weeds on his farm and detailed his plan to eliminate them using a new herbicide he'd just acquired. Reeks, though caught off guard by Al's intensity, didn't back away like the girls had earlier. Just then, they spotted a girl struggling to break free from a group of aggressive men. Without hesitation, Al stepped in, demanding they let her go. One thug told him to scram and lunged with a knife, but Al easily knocked him out, then swiftly dealt with the second. The third, an overweight coward, panicked and bolted. As he fled, the girl's hood slipped off, revealing small horns. Shocked, she hurried to pull the hood back over her head. Reeks, unfazed, asked if her name was Yulia. Startled, she questioned how he knew, and he revealed that he, too, was a demon. He then explained to Al that Yulia was no ordinary girl, she was the current Demon King's daughter. Curious, Al asked why someone like her was in a human city. Yulia hesitated, wary of his human nature. Reeks reassured her that Al was trustworthy. Eventually, she revealed that her personal servant, Volpe, had secretly sent her away, claiming she was in danger, though she still didn't fully understand the threat. Al, without pause, volunteered to escort her back to the Demon Kingdom and asked Reeks to handle the weeds while he was gone. When Reeks asked if he needed help arranging passage, Al said no, he couldn't afford a boat ride, so he'd just run there. Before Yulia could protest, Al scooped her into his arms and dashed across the sea with absurd speed. Upon reaching the Demon Kingdom, Yulia expressed gratitude, saying she now had a chance to save her people. But before they could move forward, Volpe suddenly appeared and attacked. Al shielded Yulia and engaged Volpe in combat. It wasn't long before Al realized that Volpe was acting under someone else's control. He managed to knock Volpe unconscious, but the demon quickly recovered and prepared a massive attack. Suddenly, Lucia appeared and took him down in a single blow. Al, surprised, asked how she found him. She replied that Reeks had told her everything. She introduced herself to Yulia, who cowered behind Al in fear. He reassured her and then asked about Volpe's terrifying power. Yulia confirmed Volpe was the most skilled magic user among demons, though he mostly spent time obsessively hovering over her. At the castle, they discovered every guard knocked out. Yulia rushed into the throne room to find her father collapsed on the floor. Al checked he was still alive. He then spotted a guard regaining consciousness and asked what had happened. As the demon began to speak, he noticed Yulia nearby and warned her to flee. Just as Lucia drew a sword, Al jumped in to protect Yulia. Lucia, disappointed, accused him of betrayal. Al calmly called her out, saying he knew she wasn't really his mother. The lack of a welcoming hug had tipped him off. The imposter praised him for figuring it out, then stunned him by declaring that she was Ilvia, resurrected through the power of the great evil god. She gathered dark energy and hurled it at Yulia, but Al managed to shield her just in time. The blast of magical energy ripped through the throne room like a blade of pure destruction. It carved a gaping hole through the walls, split the massive throne clean in two, and continued onward, annihilating the distant mountain range beyond the castle grounds. Al and Yulia stood frozen, wide-eyed in complete disbelief. But Ilvia, completely ignoring their reactions, looked at Al with a proud smirk and made a shocking revelation. He was harboring the sealed power of the evil god within him. Al, still trying to process what just happened, looked at her like she was speaking another language. Ilvia, unbothered by his confusion, explained further. The day he had maxed out all his farming skills, he had unknowingly received the evil god's hidden skill, an ability that massively boosted his offensive power. Al, still reeling, demanded to know what the evil god even wanted with him, stating he'd never even met the guy. But Ilvia calmly corrected him. "Oh, but you have," she said ominously, her gaze piercing. She then offered him a choice. If he agreed to join forces with her and the evil god, she would reveal the truth about everything, down to the finest detail. As she spoke, Ilvia gently cupped Al's face in her hands, her tone softening as she tried to pull him under her spell. Literally, her eyes glowed faintly as she tried to hypnotize him into submitting to her will. But before she could succeed, Yulia broke the moment. She cried out Al's name, trying to pull him back to his senses. Ilvia's expression turned sour when she heard Yulia call Al Big Brother, and her possessiveness flared. In a flash of jealousy, she seized Yulia by the throat and snarled at her to stay out of their bond. Al desperately tried to break them apart, begging Ilvia to stop, but she struck him down with a binding spell. With Al immobilized, Ilvia turned coldly to him and gave him an ultimatum: pledge loyalty to her, or watch Yulia die. Even as she struggled to breathe, Yulia pleaded with Al not to give in. Her words only enraged Ilvia further, and she prepared to finish Yulia off then and there. But just as she raised her hand for the killing blow, the pendant around Al's neck began to glow intensely. The very next moment, everything around him froze. Time itself came to a standstill. It took Al a moment to comprehend the phenomenon, and then she appeared, the mysterious woman he had seen at the market. She introduced herself as the good god and explained that the evil god had been suppressing her influence and keeping her from reaching Al all this time. She said there was little time left, but she would act quickly. She would remove the evil god's power sealed inside him and replace it with her own. As she began the transfer, the evil god tried to interrupt, but the good god easily repelled him and completed her mission. Once done, she informed Al that she'd rewind time slightly, giving him a better chance to save Yulia. Al thanked her as she faded, and just as promised, time reversed by a few moments. Back in the scene, Al sprang into action, channeling the good god's power. He moved to stop Ilvia, but what manifested were weeds. For a split second, it looked like a joke, and Ilvia mocked him for summoning such pathetic magic. But then the weeds suddenly came alive and ensnared her, pulling her away from Yulia and pinning her midair. Al's power, born of farming and divinity, had taken physical form. Ilvia broke free quickly, however, and launched another attack at Yulia. Al, thinking fast, summoned a barrier of vines thick as trees. Surprisingly, the makeshift shield held, stronger than any spell he'd ever used. The vines retaliated, wrapping around Ilvia again and buying Al a moment. Just then, Volpe arrived and launched a high-level magic blast at Ilvia, determined to protect Yulia. His spell hit its mark, and for a moment, it seemed like she'd finally been defeated. Volpe rushed to check on Yulia, but their relief was short-lived. Ilvia emerged from the rubble unscathed, furious, and hurled Volpe into a stone wall for daring to strike her. Al tried to get between them, but she ignored him and moved to finish off Volpe. Just as she raised her hand again, Al shouted for her to stop. She halted, staring at him, eyes narrowing. Realizing he wouldn't bend to her will, Ilvia gave up for now. She turned her back on them and warned Al that she would return for him when the time was right. Then, without another word, she vanished. Once she was gone, Volpe staggered to his feet and immediately grabbed Al by the collar, demanding to know what Al's connection to Ilvia was. Yulia stepped in, pleading with Volpe not to hurt Al, reminding him that Al had just saved her life, but Volpe didn't seem ready to listen. At that moment, the Demon King spoke up and commanded Volpe to release the man who had just saved them. Reluctantly, Volpe stepped back, apologizing on Volpe's behalf. The Demon King then turned to Al and asked about his connection to Yulia. Al explained that she was his younger sister and shared everything he knew. The king admitted that he didn't have much knowledge about the evil god, stating that it was the previous Demon King who had dealings with him, but promised to investigate further. As Al turned to leave, Yulia asked if they'd meet again. He reassured her that they would, prompting her to give him a hug. Bob lost his cool upon seeing this and immediately separated them, accusing Al of inappropriate behavior. Al defended himself, saying he did nothing wrong and threw the suspicion back at Bob, who denied it. Later, while walking back home, Al reflected on his encounter with Ilvia, wondering if the dragon-like being he saw in the cave years ago had been the evil god. Seeking clarity, he visited Testa and asked if he remembered anything from that day. Testa admitted he never saw the creature and had no idea what Al meant about the evil god. Afterward, the two shared some tomatoes, and before Al left, he invited Testa to visit the city sometime. Although Testa declined, he smiled quietly, happy that Al had extended the offer. Soon after, Al came across a female orc. This time, instead of fleeing, he tried to punch it, but the attack didn't work. The orc chased him, and luckily, Jake and his team showed up to help. They asked why he couldn't take the creature down, and Al admitted he had no clue. Later, at the guild, Al explained the situation to Helen and Rory, and they found it odd. Helen requested to see his stats. When he complied, she noticed that his power had decreased significantly. That's when it hit Al after the good god removed the evil god's power from his body. His stats had returned to normal. The girls asked if he knew the cause, but Al lied, saying he didn't want to worry them. At that moment, Reeks entered with a letter from Lucia. As Al began reading, the girls got nervous because the tone felt threatening. However, the rest of the letter revealed Lucia had heard something had happened to him and offered her support, saying she was there if he needed advice. She encouraged him to return home and ended the letter with yet another confession of love. Al, having had enough, stopped reading. Reeks asked if he planned to reply, but Al flatly said no. As the Reeks turned to go, he bumped into Fowl on his way out. After a brief exchange of greetings, the princess approached Al and asked if he'd like to spend some time with her. This immediately set off Rory and Helen, who were clearly annoyed. When a tipsy Luke tried to insert himself into the moment, the three girls shot him such intense glares that he quickly backed off. Watching the scene unfold, Al couldn't help but reflect on how strange his life had become. Despite the chaos and confusion, he realized he wasn't alone. Surrounded by friends and people who genuinely cared for him, Al felt a sense of peace. He decided not to dwell on the uncertainty of what might happen the next time Ilvia reappeared. Instead, he threw himself back into his farming duties after all. Becoming the greatest farmer was still his ultimate dream. And that's it for today's video, guys. Watch the following video, and I will catch you in the next one.